Welcome. This is Windsor Lindor. Thank you for joining me in this space where we explore self-leadership, emotional intelligence, inner architecture, and the disciplined work of building a life that can be trusted from the inside out. Today, we enter a powerful threshold together. We are exploring the mirror of emotional truth, emotion, identity, and the architecture of aligned decisions. This is not simply a conversation about emotion. It is a conversation about liberation, a conversation about identity. It is a conversation about what becomes possible when a human being is honest enough inwardly that the outer life no longer needs to be carried by strain, performance, or fragmentation. The life we desire begins with what we are willing to release. When we honor intelligence, cultivate excellence, and strengthen our inner foundation, we begin uncovering our true nature. Living the life we desire requires more than ambition. It requires soul freedom. It requires the willingness to release what quietly imprisons clarity, weakens consistency, and interferes with the quality of our leadership, our relationships, and our future. There comes a moment when we recognize that success cannot be built by continuing to swim against the tide of our own inner life. The deeper invitation is to reclaim ownership of who we are, to release outdated thinking, to confront the private burdens we carry, to cultivate the awareness required to see clearly what is shaping our choices. Many people long for freedom while still carrying the stowaways of heavy emotion, old wounds, and destructive habits. These inner burdens quietly distort clarity, diminish capacity, and weaken the consistency required for sustainable success. So, wherever you are, take one full breath. Let yourself arrive because there are moments in life when the greatest progress we make does not come from moving faster. It comes from becoming more truthful. And that is where we begin. He is the first current. Leadership begins to strain the moment performance outruns inner alignment. A person can remain productive for a long time while quietly disconnecting from meaning. They can continue delivering, achieving, speaking, leading, even motivating. Yet, somewhere beneath the surface, the inner structure begins to weaken. Emotional depth starts thinning. Self-awareness becomes selective. The outward life keeps moving. The inward life begins drifting. The mirror of emotional truth interrupts that drift. This mirror does not flatter. It clarifies. It reveals where I am reactive. It reveals where I am fragmented. It reveals where I am still handing authority over my life to fear. Old habits, inherited narratives, and unresolved emotional history. This is not punishment. This is permission. Permission to stop confusing motion with alignment. Permission to stop mistaking intensity for truth. Permission to stop calling exhaustion purpose. Permission to return to what is real. Some of the deepest forms of transformation do not happen through force. They happen through receptivity. They happen when warmth teaches what pressure never could. They happen when a person becomes willing to listen to life, to truth, and to the quiet intelligence beneath reaction. That is the first stabilizing current of creative leadership. Awareness before agreement. Before I agree with every thought, before I obey every feeling, before I let every impulse become a decision, I pause, I observe, I name what is happening, I create enough sacred distance for discernment to enter. And once that distance opens, another question emerges. What am I truly responsible for? The mirror shows us what is present. The next movement asks what we are prepared to do with what we see. Functional adulthood asks something difficult and deeply clarifying of us. It asks us to distinguish between responsibility and captivity. Responsibility says, I will tell the truth about what happened. I will acknowledge my part without distortion. I will learn what must be learned. I will repair what can still be repaired. I will become more honest, more disciplined, more skillful, more awake. Captivity says, I will keep punishing myself in place of growth. I will confuse guilt with integrity. I will remain emotionally bound to an earlier version of myself because I do not yet know how to honor the lesson without continuing the suffering. This distinction is not abstract. It shapes leadership, relationships, decision making, and identity. Many people carry an old emotional sentence inside themselves. They replay the past. They rehearse old wounds. They keep explaining what happened. They keep circling the same pain. And slowly, they begin building identity around what injured them instead of what the experience came to teach. A mature life cannot be built there. A coherent life cannot be built there. A sustainable success story cannot be built there. Adaptive leadership requires the capacity to face reality without collapsing into it. It requires emotional regulation strong enough to hold discomfort without becoming defined by it. It requires the discipline to ask, what is still mine to own? And what is no longer mine to carry? That question is not avoidance. That question is architecture. The moment a person can ask it honestly, dignity begins returning. Inner movement becomes possible again. Stagnation starts losing authority. Once responsibility is reclaimed, identity must be rebuilt on something stronger than pain, explanation, or performance. There comes a point in every serious life when explanation becomes a hiding place. There comes a point when self-examination must become self-governance. There comes a point when we must stop building identity around the wound and begin building character around what the wound taught us. The past may explain part of your formation. It must not become the executive function of your future. Some moments deserve grief. Some deserve apology. Some deserve repair. Some deserve silence and release. None deserves permanent occupation of your inner authority. This is why one of the deepest practice of self-leadership is this. Carry the lesson, not the sentence. Carry the wisdom. Carry the humility. Carry the discipline. Carry the sharpened awareness. Carry the deeper reverence for truth. Leave behind the endless internal punishment that pretends to be morality while quietly draining life, creativity, and direction. The river has moved. You have moved. Wisdom begins the moment you stop asking the water to come back and start deciding how you will walk forward from this shore. And that is where identity becomes functional. A functional human being is not defined by image, intensity, or performance. A functional human being is revealed by the quality of awareness, the maturity of emotional life, and the integrity with which they choose. Functionality is not perfection. It is inward order. It is disciplined relationship with truth. It is the ability to feel deeply without surrounding authorship. It is the strength to remain teachable without becoming psychologically captive. And sight is powerful. And sight alone is not enough. The life must be designed to support what the soul has finally understood. If a person wants a coherent life, they need more than inspiration. They need structure. They need practice. They need disciplines that protect clarity when emotion rises and pressure increases. This is where the 6 pillars of the functional human being matter. First, awareness before agreement. Notice before endorsing. Pause before obeying. Let observation come before interpretation. Second pillars. Emotional truth without emotional tyranny. Feel fully. Interpret carefully. Respond deliberately. Emotions carry information. They do not replace wisdom. Third pillar. Identity through responsibility. There you ask, who am I becoming through this pattern, this decision, this response? Mature identity is built through authorship, not avoidance. Fourth, congruence in relationship. Settle first. Speak second. Let clarity carry the message. Trust grows where inward reality and outward expression belong to the same conversation. Fifth, systems and habits that protect alignment. Small structures protect large values. The aligned choice becomes sustainable when it is supported by rhythm, boundary, and repetition. 6. Pillar. Aligned decision as embodied integrity. The final measure of inner work is not what I understand, it is what I embody. Integrity is truth made operational. These pillars do not describe an idealized human being. They describe a practicing one, a growing one, a disciplined one, a person learning to make life a place where trust can live. That is the architecture of aligned decision. A meaningful life does not emerge from insight alone. It must be supported by systems, habits, and practice that protect what matters. Emotional maturity without structure can remain aspirational. Vision without discipline, embodiment remains fragile. This is true in leadership. This is true in relationships. This is true in healing. This is true in business. This is true in the quiet architecture of a private life. The functional human being creates rhythms of reflection, regulation, restraint, and right action. They do not wait for crisis to discover values. They build a life that protects those values and advance. They create pauses before important conversations. They schedule reflection before exhaustion makes truth inaccessible. They establish boundaries that keep urgency from colonizing the inner world. They practice honesty before distortion grows into narrative. They create simple, repeatable habits that make the aligned choice easier to live. This is where discipline becomes a form of self-respect. And this is where liberation becomes practical. Freedom. It's not the absence of external pressure. Freedom is the presence of internal order. Freedom is the ability to choose clearly in the presence of emotion. Freedom is what emerges when the mind is no longer crowded by stale resentment, with repetitive fear and self-defeating habit. Yes, the sacred work is to fill the mind with desire, perseverance, creative courage, self-confidence, discipline, and unwavering commitment. So in doing so, we strengthen the inner foundation from which true transformation becomes possible. To honor intelligence, cultivate excellence, and uncover our true nature. It's not merely personal work, it is leadership work. Because when the mind is strengthened, leadership becomes cleaner. When the inner world is less burdened, choices become clearer. When emotional life is more integrated, influence becomes more trustworthy. So, what does all of this ask of us now, in this season, at this hour, and the reality we are actually living? There is always a decision waiting beneath the surface of our lives. Not simply a practical decision, a deeper one. Will I continue to live from reaction, an inherited pattern, and emotional confusion? Or will I become the kind of human being who can be trusted with freedom, influence, and purpose? This is the invitation of emotional truth, to pause before reacting when emotion is elevated, to tell yourself the truth before telling a story about others, to refuse to let habits speak with more authority than wisdom, to regulate the inner state before trying to influence the outer world, to choose congruence over image, to let discipline become a form of self-respect, to refine character with the same seriousness used to pursue results. A coherent life is built one aligned decision at a time. That is how identity strengthens. That is how leadership depends. That is how trust becomes possible. That is how success becomes sustainable from the inside out. Because the world does not need more polished fragmentation. It needs functional human beings. It needs leaders who can carry truth without dramatization. It needs people whose inner life is steady enough that their outer life can be trusted. It needs men, it needs women who are willing to release the burdens that make them smaller than their calling. So let me ask you directly, what is one inner burden you know it is time to release so you can lead and live with greater freedom? Is it resentment? Is it shame? Is it an old story about your worth? Is it fear of change? Is it the exhausting habit of over-explaining yourself? Is it the need to perform strength while privately feeling disconnected? Go ahead, name it honestly. Because what remains unnamed often remains in power. And what is brought into the light can finally be related to with wisdom. Not everything must be carried forward. Not every burden is a badge of death. Not every emotional weight is proof of integrity. Some things are simply overdue for release. And sometimes the next level of your life does not require more effort first. Sometimes it requires more truth. As we close, take one more breath and let this question stay with you. Who am I choosing to be now? Not yesterday, not in the wound, not in the old explanation, now. And alongside that question, hold this one as well. What am I finally ready to release? Because the life you desire is not waiting for a more impressive version of you. It is waiting for a freer one, a truer one, a more inwardly ordered one. If this reflection meets you in a living place within yourself, I invite you to continue this journey with me in the upcoming free virtual lecture, The Mirror of Emotional Truth, Emotion, Identity, and the Architecture of Aligned Decision. Visit lindorconsulting.com to learn more. We will go deeper into the relationship between emotion, identity, aligned decisions, and the system and habit that support coherent. Awakening is not a destination. It is a journey into the heart of self-leadership. It is a return to clarity, a return to courage, a return to emotional truth, a return to the extraordinary life that becomes possible when inner architecture and outward action finally belong to the same conversation. Thank you for being here. I am Windsor Lindor.